Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to MovieFilm. It's episode 288. My name is Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey, man.
How's it going? You know what I think almost every time at the beginning here? Yeah. I have this new headset that I'm using, which I love, came off your recommendation, and it allows, I just feel so much freer. My brain feels freer when I have it on. I can move my head, you know, like post Tim Burton Batman. But then I lean back in my chair and it squeaks like something fierce. And every single week about this time, I go, oh man, I forgot to get WD-40. Every week I think, get WD-40, Brian, and then I never do it. And then at this moment, I'm like, oh yeah, the WD-40.
Well, maybe this will be the thing to finally make you put it in your Amazon cart.
Yep. Hopefully so. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. As we record this, I am on spring break. I'm enjoying not having anywhere to be. It's a nice feeling.
That's awesome, man. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, spring break because you're working school. That's awesome.
That is true. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have anything going on? Are you taking it easy? Going anywhere?
There's no going anywhere. There's no escape from this. No, it's just you know, all the kids are busy doing their stuff, and I'm just here. I'm here in the lair. I'm recording with you. It's nice.
I've been in the lair. It's very cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
What's new with you though?
Well, watched a couple things over here. You know, I had not had this on my radar, but just about a week ago or so, a documentary about Steve Martin dropped on Apple TV Plus called Steve! Exclamation point, and then in parentheses, Martin. And as soon as Federica and I saw that, we're like, oh yeah, that's what we're watching tonight. And it's a bit lengthy. It's actually in two parts. So there's two about 90-minute installments to it. And the first installment is about his stand-up. And it's interesting because it has an aesthetic where there's a lot of sort of B-roll of the 50s, 60s interspersed to really set up an energy and like a mood about the time that, this was all his career was unfolding. And then the second part is a whole different tone. It's much more, in the present. Steve Martin, I think he's just narrator in the first part, but in the second part, you see a lot of him now, and he's talking about his acting career. So two, very different tones, both pieces, but we watched them both in one night. I think it totaled about 3 hours.
Okay.
But oh man, we love this. I mean, if you're a Steve Martin fan, this is a must. It's amazing how much archive footage they have in the first one, between cassette tapes of Martin, working out material, and a lot of surprising amount of film and video of his performances. And I mean, we were just watching him do all this old footage of his stand-up. We were cracking up as if we were in the audience watching a stand-up special. The stuff is still so hilarious. But what's nice is it also gets, really into his head. He narrates, and he really gets into what led him to stand up, his philosophy on stand up. And even in part two, it gets into him being an art collector, which I didn't really know a lot about. And, sometimes when you see wealthy people being art collectors, it's like, well, that's just a way to move money, around. Or
right.
I think famously in the Metallica documentary, there's a scene of Lars Ulrich selling a painting for $1 million, and you're like, that's not rock and roll. Like it just seems so cynical, the way he's like, I just made $1 million on this painting. Like it's an investment,
right.
And with Steve Martin, it's surprisingly very, very personal, the paintings. And at one point he says that he doesn't want to talk. It shows an old interview where he's like, I don't want to talk about it. That's actually something I keep to myself, which I didn't understand. And then later, now in the present, in the documentary, he talks about what the paintings mean to him and what he thinks the paintings mean and how they relate to him. And I found it surprisingly moving, actually, his connection with it. And so I think between the two parts, if you love Steve Martin, you're going to get a lot of entertainment out of watching him do his thing. But it was also very illuminating, very insightful into who he is. And you start to see themes in his comedy and in his work and in the movies and books he's written. And you're like, oh, I really do feel like I walk away understanding him better. And it makes you, if you love him, it'll make you love him even more. So,
well, I like that.
Yeah, it was great. I definitely recommend it. It's on Apple TV Plus.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I had one more experience I was going to talk about, but it's kind of for ulterior motives, something I want to pick your brain about. But
okay.
So I think I've mentioned before, but Regal Theaters, which is the theater closest to me, is showing old movies every Wednesday, and sometimes now on Mondays, I guess, and even the weekends. They're showing a lot of older movies. This is my point. And they showed The Matrix last night. And anyway, our mutual friend Chad and I, on Monday, we went to go see Dumb and Dumber. And first of all, just to speak to the experience, it was really fun to go to a theater to watch not only like a movie that I know very well and enjoy, but just a comedy. I've been seeing articles and think pieces about how they don't make comedies for the theater much anymore. And I haven't really thought a whole lot about it, but being there and it was a huge crowd. It was bigger than the crowd I had for Godzilla or anything else recently.
Wow.
And yeah, it was packed.
For Dumb and Dumber.
For Dumb and Dumber. And I mean, everybody's just rolling with laughter, and it felt good. Laughter feels good in a place like that.
Yeah.
So,
and Nicole Kidman was right.
Yeah, she's right. Actually, I've seen a parody of that, whatever you call it, theater commercial at the beginning, and they changed the movies that she's looking at, and one of them is, what's his name? Harry. Oh my gosh, not Jim Carrey. The other. Oh my gosh, I keep wanting to say Daniel Stern, and it's not Daniel Stern. This is embarrassing. Help me, Zachy.
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you. No. Let you work through this on your own. I want to see how this ends.
Embarrassing. From the dude. I could be Googling this right now, and I'm actually trying to. All right. Okay, let's. Dude, my brain is frozen. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I promise I don't.
Jeff Daniels.
Wow, we got there.
Holy cow. It was like Daniel Stern would not get out of the way in my head. Anyway, I've seen a parody of that Nicole Kidman ad where she's watching Jeff Daniels having diarrhea on the toilet, and she's watching in Wild Wonder. Anyway, it was very fun. I love that Regal is doing this. I mean, Chad and I were actually marking our calendars. We're like, okay, next week's The Dark Knight. Week after that is Inception. They're showing the Spider-Man films.
Which are all like sold out, by the way.
Yeah, he checked in with me today about it because he said there's basically no seats left. And so he's like, if you're in, we gotta do this. I love this. I'm going to the theater more to see these old movies than anything new. So I hope to keep it up. But the reason I wanted to bring up Dumb and Dumber was this movie came out in 1994. And when it started on the big screen, I actually was surprised by how much grain it had. It looked kind of old, and I think I've gotten used to, with HD TV and 4K and everything, a lot of these movies, especially ones that get watched a lot still, are restored, right? And so then you see them and they look beautiful. They all, in many cases, they look like as if they were shot this year. So it was sort of surprising to see a movie that I'm sure was rescanned and quote unquote restored, but I was like, whoa, this looks like it has a lot more grain than I'm used to seeing in restored movies these days. But then it started making me think about what that actually means. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about. So a lot of times when you are going to do the 4K version of a popular old film, they rescan the original negative and they run some software over it to get rid of the scratches and whatnot. And we know this, but they run other software on there to sort of sharpen the image a little bit, right? And to maybe, if there's a heavy grain, soften the grain a little bit. And so it's not just like they're doing some sort of high-res scan of celluloid. I mean, they're really giving the movie a little bit of a facelift. Right. And sometimes it looks incredible. I always cite Back to the Future because whenever I see that, I think if we were to look at the original negative, I doubt it would look that clean. However, I feel like the integrity and the intention of that film's look is entirely intact. It doesn't really look manipulated. It just looks beautiful. But then recently, it was, if you follow this sort of news, Jim Cameron's movies, Aliens, True Lies, The Abyss, have been released in 4K. Yeah. And to many people's eyes, they've been sharpened, tweaked, facelifted, however you want to call it, a few degrees too far in the wrong direction.
That's right.
Right. Where they start to look a little too waxy or for example, The Abyss was on TV the other day and I noticed, I was like, ooh, this looks kind of odd. And so Federica passed by and I was like, wait, look at, what do you think of this? How this looks? And she said it looked like AI.
Yeah, well, they apparently used AI to gussy up the frames. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I don't know. I guess I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on that because I do feel like sometimes it can really work. And again, I will always say Back to the Future, and I know that Zemeckis and Gale and all these people provide input on that, but you would imagine Cameron would provide input on his films. And
well, so I mean, to hear him talk about it, he was the one single-handedly doing the restoration frame by frame. Based on, I'm working on it. Oh, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And it starts to feel a little bit like he was, it's like when you're on a deadline and you're like, oh, I'm working on it. And you actually haven't even started it.
Right.
And then in a mad dash, he punched it into the AI Matron and we ended up with what we did.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of curious about your feelings of it. I mean, in a way, a roundabout way, is this sort of like what George Lucas has done to his movies a little bit, where this is not what exists on a frame necessarily. You're sort of putting an Instagram filter on it, for lack of a better way of saying it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what are your feelings on that? Does it catch your eye? Does it bother you? Do you not mind? Do you like that it looks a little bit more modern?
I don't. I would like whatever the restoration they do should be evocative of the movie as it originally existed.
Mm-hmm.
And grain is a part of that. There was a restoration of Predator on Blu-ray maybe about 15 years ago, which was disastrous for just that reason.
Huh.
Because everything looked smudged kind of, it didn't look...
Yeah.
The grain was taken out and it didn't, and nothing looked natural. So I heard about how these Cameron transfers look, and I can only, I don't have the physical discs, but I have the 4K copies on digital, and I'm not crazy about it, but I can't speak to how it looks on disc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it's almost like a trade-off, right? Because like something like True Lies, well, geez, I mean, that has not been available in HD, period.
Yep.
It skipped Blu-ray entirely.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, you either have SD,
right,
which doesn't look great, or you have 4K, which doesn't look great for different reasons.
Yeah.
So pick your poison.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because when The Abyss was at first announced that it was coming out, they put it in theaters last December, and we went and checked it out, and I remember it looking pretty good, but it was on an IMAX screen. It was very big. I do remember some grain. But yeah, it was surprising seeing it on TV. And also I was watching a little bit of True Lies, and I was like, ooh, this looks, the way you said it, sort of smudgy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just kind of disappointing for someone who's as exacting as James Cameron is.
But I think that because Cameron is not alone in this, right? I mean, the recent the 4K restorations to the Godfather films, I think I'm not thrilled with, you know.
Really? Oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, just I mean, Coppola supervised this stuff, but like the color timing is a little different.
Mm,
You know what I mean? It's specifically the first one. He's trying to make it look like a modern movie, and I think so much of that movie's look is how it was shot when it was shot.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And William Friedkin did this. Before he passed away, he did a restoration of French Connection,
Hmm.
and that too. Like he changed the way it looks.
Yeah.
And so this stuff always bugs me. And I say this all the time where I'm like, do whatever you want, but hit save as.
Yeah, sure.
Like, let us see the original version. And it's kind of like how much do you want to get hung up on it also? Like,
Sure, sure.
so that's like, because it seems like that's just par for the course now, is that you have these directors who go in and decades later, they'll completely reinterpret their own artistic intent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it feels unfortunate to me more often than not.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, and this is probably an obvious statement, but I don't mind a little bit of a facelift. That's, it is what it is. But just when it starts to look that sort of
Mhm.
non-reality, like I said, like Instagram filters, sort of, that doesn't look like a a human face anymore. Human face has, pores, and
Yep, you're
stubble
exactly
and
right.
whatnot. I lament it a little bit, especially with films that I love so much. I want there to be a version of them. If you're going to tweak the color a little bit and I don't really think about it, then good for you, that you can do that, I guess, if you
Right.
want. But yeah, I don't want to look at something that doesn't resemble the integrity of the film anymore.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But yeah, anyway, thanks. I thought of you immediately, honestly. I mean, this whole conversation sprung to mind as the movie started, and I thought, oh wow, yeah, I just wasn't expecting the movie to look this old, I guess, because I think of movies that are even older that I watch now that have been restored that don't look like that. And then it made me think then, oh, all the decision making that must go into the restoration of these films and how far to go with it.
Yeah, and the other side of it, I think software has introduced so many more options for
Mm.
filmmakers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so there is a little bit of like being a kid in a candy store, I would imagine.
Sure, sure.
Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can. Whereas back in the day, I mean, even during the Star Wars Special Edition era, notwithstanding the CGI stuff, which we can get into, but like the film itself, he didn't fundamentally change how the movie looks.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. So anyway, thanks for indulging me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a short break, and we have some listener letters on the other side. And we are back, and we have a couple of listener letters here, Brian.
All right.
So this is from Charles Landy, and he wrote us a note on Facebook about our last episode about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which, you and I, both of us, came away with having positive responses to.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it almost feels like we convinced ourselves we were positive on it a little bit, right? I mean, I think we were both like, well, I mean, it wasn't bad. And then the more we talked about it, I think we started to appreciate what we got.
And I will say, since the last time we recorded, I've gotten in a second viewing because I took my older two boys, and yeah, I left the theater like, no, I had a good time with this one. I don't. It's ultimately it's a thumbs up from me.
I mean, that's funny. It's the same thing that happened to me. A second viewing made me sort of really look at it and go, no, I mean, what's to be upset about?
Yeah. So Charles, he enjoyed it too, and he says, I had a great time with Frozen Empire, but man, the Ghostbusters Empire needs a good project manager. Here's how it should go. And he has listed who should serve in what capacity. And I agree with his listing here. He says, McKenna Grace, Ghostbuster. Paul Rudd, Ghostbuster.
Mhm.
Carrie Coon runs daily operations at the firehouse with Janine, liaison between home base and the research facility.
Got it.
Finn Wolfhard, unless they can figure out what else to do with him, he's a Ghostbuster who decides he's getting told for this shit in the next movie and goes off to college.
I'm okay with that. And it's
Definitely agree with
not the actor's fault, but I don't think the movie knows what to do with him, and that's not fun to watch.
James Acaster, Ghostbuster and the main liaison between the team and whatever research is being done at Winston's facility.
Mhm.
Kumail Nanjiani, Ghostbuster slash liaison between the physical world and the spirit world. It would be interesting to have a Ghostbuster with a genuine connection to the other side.
I agree with that. I love that. That was something that's said in the movie. His lineage, talking about his ancestors, someone says, so they were the first Ghostbusters.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
makes
exactly.
sense that he would then be a modern Ghostbuster.
I agree. Patton Oswalt, guy in the chair / historian who figures out what's happening when it starts to happen. No need for him to suit up.
Totally.
Yep. Ray Stantz, as Venkman put it, Ray still very much is the heart of the Ghostbusters, so I guess he can do what he wants, but he should really work with Patton on providing history and context and with podcast to be the media-facing side of the team. Those two together were amazing.
I thought so too.
Yep.
That was a fun duo.
Peter Venkman, on-call consultant. I didn't need him to be in this movie outside of his interviewing Kumail and determining that there was definitely something strange in the neighborhood going on with him. Winston Zedmore, money, on-call consultant, t-shirt model.
Referring to that, I don't know if it's the red carpet, but there was some sort of appearance, right?
Yeah, he has become a meme because as a 78-year-old man, he has the physique that far outshines 45-year-old Zaki Hassan. I'll tell you that.
Speaking of that, by the way, I saw Kim Gordon last night on Jimmy Kimmel from Sonic Youth. She's 70 and she was kicking so much ass. It was incredible. Wow. I was like, man, 70, 78 is the new, I don't know, late 50s.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better about what we got coming. Janine works with Carrie Coon, I guess. Didn't need her in this movie at all.
Yeah, I mean that's the tough part, right? I mean, while they're still alive, it's nice to have the connective tissues, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm loath to cut her out, but. Yeah, I mean, she didn't get a ton to do. I mean, even her strapping on the proton pack wasn't particularly, momentous. It didn't feel
it wasn't like finally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because there was no sense in the previous movies that was something that she wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, Lucky, didn't need her in this at all either. Don't need her going forward either. Didn't we see her freeze to death in one of the early trailers? Yes, we did. Or at least freeze.
I thought she was going to die when we watched the movie. I wouldn't be surprised if that's something they changed.
That was my thinking. I was like, they probably want this to be something that's family safe,
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope the Sony people are listening to our show and taking diligent notes on what Charles suggested.
I think that's great. And I think not everyone needs equal screen time. But as long as you give them important tasks and they each get a scene where they get to do the thing they're good at, I think that will feel satisfying.
I agree. And I'm actually very curious because, I mean, this one definitely fell hard during its second weekend.
Mm.
I'm curious to see if it stabilizes and if so, kind of where it ends up.
Well, I feel like we probably said this, but they don't need to be $100 million plus movies.
That's right.
Why not? I know this just isn't the current thinking these days, but make a $60, $70 million Ghostbusters movie and have it make the profit you can anticipate it's going to make, and it will be successful in its own way. Have a stable of different sort of mathematics, that are all successful and making profits. And I don't know, it just seems smart to me instead of expecting everything to make $1 billion.
Well, this is why you should be running a studio.
or I'm going to be like the Duff guy who tries to make changes and then all of a sudden the gates get closed and he's like, well, that's the end of me.
Here's a note we got from JJ Hodges. And he says, hey guys, it's your friendly neighborhood JJ. You two already know my embarrassing Jurassic Park story that we discussed on my show. So, yeah, Brian, you and I appeared on JJ's show for Comic Junkies.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Jurassic Park. He says, but another great memory I have is going to see The Mask of Zorro with my mom when it came out. And this is, we've had people writing in and telling us their memorable movie-going experiences. And he says, in the opening scene, when Zorro is kicking ass, my mom was thrilled. She was jumping up and down and clapping like it was the greatest thing she'd ever seen. Naturally, as an 11-year-old, I was totally embarrassed. Cut to 2012, and I'm with my then girlfriend. Opening night of The Avengers. Several times in that movie, I was cheering, jumping up and down in my seat, and just giddy as a schoolboy. Name that movie, by the way, Brian.
Last Crusade.
Good job. I know I embarrassed the hell out of my girlfriend, but I didn't care. It did make me want to apologize to my mom for the way I reacted to her so many years earlier. Unfortunately, I never really got the chance due to her issues with her mental state and overall health. Don't worry, the story does have a happy ending. About 5 years later, I watched Mask of Zorro after her funeral and tweeted at Matt Lesher. He plays Captain Harrison Love in that movie. That my mom would have loved him as Reverse Flash on the CW Flash series because I was a huge fan, and told the story of how she loved Zorro. He actually responded and said, "Let your geek flag fly," which made me very happy. I know my mom would have gotten a kick out of the fact that he responded. Thanks, guys. Love the show.
Oh, man. That's a lovely story. I love that.
He also adds, P.S. I freaking loved Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and as Zachy says about the Jurassic movies, I'm an easy lay. Give me the original cast, good jokes, and cool ghost-busting gadgets, and I'm good to go.
Nice.
Can't argue with that. Here's a note we got from Carlos, who says, Zachy and Brian, first and foremost, my sincere thanks for perpetually being the class act of the fan podcast space with an inviting show that consistently has the feel of a pair of best friends holding court amongst other friends in the form of your listeners. Truly the podcast standard that many aspire to achieve.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. He says, while listening to episode 287 and your insights on the Quiet on Set docuseries, Brian brought up parallels that he saw as they relate to the Finding Neverland documentary that focused on, or was it Leaving Neverland?
Yes, because Finding Neverland is the Johnny Depp movie.
That's Johnny Depp movie. Yeah.
About Peter Pan,
yeah. So the Leaving Neverland documentary that focused on allegations against Michael Jackson, simply because that particular piece of media has come up on your podcast a couple of times, I thought I would respectfully provide some insight into that series that you may not have been aware of. The accusers in Leaving Neverland have both been deemed to be, quote, not credible / deceitful by judges in civil proceedings 3 to 4 times in recent years, with aspects of that production deemed to be falsehoods and lies of omission. While your show and my email are not the avenues to litigate the entire affair, I would respectfully recommend the Square One documentary in Prime Video that does a great job following the thread of allegations against Michael Jackson from the 90s to the present, as well as the personal and media motivations for doing so. And then he went on to list several other links and whatnot. So I figured, since we did mention, that series or that documentary last time, I thought Carlos's response was worth including here as well.
No, I 100% agree. I'm glad you did. I actually just wrote down Square One because I'll check it out.
I mean, look, without even getting into all the accusations in that documentary, I think what we can say that's not controversial is that he was somebody who was denied the ability to just live a normal life, and that manifested in a lot of, unhealthy ways. Mm-hmm. And it, if nothing else, it's an argument for protecting your kids from the Hollywood limelight.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because he was somebody who essentially spent the rest of his adulthood trying to recapture the childhood he never got to have. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he ends, he says, just thought I would share with my podcast pals simply because information in the Fifth Estate doesn't work like it used to. And I thought I would offer some alternative perspectives that may not have crossed your eyes. Thanks for all you do once again, Carlos.
I think that's a healthy thing to do. I appreciate that, Carlos.
Thank you so much. And with that, let's take another short break and talk through some trailers. All right. Hey, Brian, we're back. And boy, there are a lot of trailers suddenly out for a whole bunch of movies that are coming out.
That is true. That's always nice for me. I think I complain about this on the show sometimes, but I do go to the theater often, and I have to sit through the same trailers over and over and over. Arthur the King, Mark Wahlberg dog movie. I'm very thankful that has been released, so I don't have to watch that trailer again. So anytime there's a new batch of trailers, I'm happy.
See, I honestly thought for the longest time, because I missed the trailers completely, I just thought that was like a new modern day update of the King Arthur story.
Oh, that's funny. Really?
And I just kept picturing Mark Wahlberg being like, "Hey, what the hell's going on? Where's the sword? Where's Excalibur, huh?"
Well, see, that I would watch.
I'm kind of disappointed that that's not that movie. But you know what is coming, Brian?
What's that?
It is The Crow.
It's a little hard to believe, I'm going to say, because we have been hearing the threat of a remake of The Crow. At least a decade, right? Maybe more.
Yeah.
Jason Momoa was attached. There's actually test footage of him as The Crow that you can look up on YouTube.
Yeah. And instead we got this one, which is, the threat is real, one might say. Because we got this one was starring Bill Skarsgård. Why don't we play some of the audio and then we can talk about it?
What's the first thing you liked about me?
I thought that you were quite brilliantly broken.
You feel like my person.
You feel like my person.
When someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. And sometimes something so bad happens that the soul cannot rest. Until you put the wrong things right.
All right, so June 7th, this one comes out. It's directed by Rupert Sanders. And look, I got to be honest. I went into this, I hit play on YouTube with not a scintilla of judgment in my heart. And this looks like ass.
Zachy, I actually was sort of getting excited about the idea of a new Crow movie. I'm not like a full-on Crow head or anything, but I saw the movie in 1994. I was 14 years old. It definitely captured my imagination. I remember it very well. The soundtrack I remember very well. It was cool. It felt like the equivalent of an indie rock song or something. It was moody, evocative. The movie had its own kind of punk rock vibe and visual aesthetic. And this one feels like a sort of polished studio take on that. It's like the Hot Topic ready take of The Crow. So it feels commercial, too polished, lacking soul. The first one had soul. I don't know. And you know what? Look, I'm not 14. So maybe this is going to be that moody thing for 14-year-olds now. I have no idea. But for me, this doesn't match the vibe that makes me endeared to the property of The Crow.
I don't see anything in this trailer that'll appeal to kids right now. And I see plenty that's going to piss off the people who know The Crow. You know what I mean? It's just, it's like it's that perfect Socratic ideal of a movie that appeals to nobody.
Yeah.
But hey, we will be talking about it in 2 short months.
Oh, I'll see it. Truly, that's the thing. That's our ethos, right? These are just our opinions on trailers. I still would love to go into this movie I have curiosity about and be surprised. So it's happened before. We'll see.
Well, speaking of things that have happened before, we got the new Alien movie is coming out. Alien Romulus. First of all, it's directed by Fede Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake from like 10 years ago.
Okay.
Now, this is the 7th Alien movie.
Wow.
Which is kind of bananas when you think about it, right? Because what is that? That's like four from the original series.
Mm-hmm.
2 Alien versus Predator movies, and then Alien Covenant. Would we include Prometheus in that? I guess so. Kind of.
Yeah, I think so. Right. I mean,
Alien-ish.
I mean, that's certainly how they were marketed.
So then this is like 8.
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah, this would be the 8th one then.
Yeah. By the way, not to go down another path, but I've never seen the Alien versus Predator movies, and I don't know. To me, they just seemed sort of like taking something recognizable from something else and not being what those films felt like. I like the Predator movies, I like the Alien movies, but I felt like this was just, it could have been anything, two creatures, like some violent face-off movie.
Well, so here, I actually just revisited Alien versus Predator, the first one, a couple months ago, because I was going through the Predator movies with my older kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so we watched 1 and 2, and then we watched the first Alien versus Predator. And I've said it all along. I think for what that movie is, I think it's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound like damning with faint praise. It's not meant that way. I think it's good at being that movie.
Sure.
The second one I thought was awful.
Interesting. So what's the difference?
It's just something about the tone and kind of the scope of the story. The first one, now admittedly the second one, I mean, I saw it once when it came out. It's been a while. This one, the first one I've seen a few times now, but it's directed by Paul Anderson,
mm-hmm.
who did Mortal Kombat, and he did Event Horizon.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a very Mortal Kombat meets Event Horizon aesthetic.
Sure.
But it's PG-13, so make of that what you will. So I'm not here to recommend it. I am saying that one I don't think is terrible. I think the second one is very bad.
Okay. I only bring it up because I've never checked them out, and I was like, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. I could.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably fine. I would. Here's what I would say: if you're like channel surfing, you happen to come across the first Alien versus Predator, maybe not. There could be worse ways to spend 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That said, this one, what has me intrigued is that it is set in between the first and second movies.
Mm.
And I'm kind of like, well, that feels, because there's like a good, whatever it is, right? Like 60 years between Alien and Aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a fertile time frame to do something with.
Yeah, and I mean, those are the ones obviously I know best and I like the most, and they have the aesthetic that really draws me to that universe, right? The space trucker kind of thing, people wearing blue jeans, but in the future, on spaceships. I love that. So I'm down for more of that. And, the trailer's not very, it doesn't give you much. It's a lot of just sort of vibes and pushing through hallways of the ship and being very reminiscent of those first two films, right? Visually. And what the ships look like, all damp and, cold and gooey. But I like that. So it's a good teaser for me.
What's interesting to me is that this was part of, like, if you remember Prey, the Predator prequel that came out last year, 2 years ago,
mm-hmm.
that went straight to Hulu. And this was supposed to go straight to Hulu.
Oh.
But they decided to make it theatrical.
Good. Man, it was a shame about Prey going to...
Prey should have been in theaters.
Yep, definitely.
Right? And I'm assuming they're doing something else with the Predator verse. And I am like, well, I feel like Ridley Scott he's kind of maxed out whatever he's going to do. I know he didn't get to finish his Prometheus trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I would offer that that's probably fine.
Yeah. There were some enjoyable is not the right word, but intriguing things I felt.
Yeah.
Just world building ish sort of stuff that I enjoyed. But on the whole, I can't say there were movies I really overall enjoyed.
No, I agree with that. And I am trying to find what the budget is for this one, but I think I'm assuming they've kept it somewhat manageable, and it feels like an easy, easy way to keep the franchise alive,
Yeah. I'm hoping for the best with this one.
I mean, do you remember like when Blomkamp was going to do his own sequel to Aliens?
Yes, because there was a lot of production art that was leaked, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then Ridley Scott kiboshed that.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, Ridley. Well, here's another one. Speaking of, man, everything old is new again. We have Beetlejuice 2 coming out, and it has the appropriate title, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice.
I mean, it's pretty clever, right? So then you they have to be hoping for the third one. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Perfect.
Mm. Well, here, let's play some of that.
Daylight come and we want to go.
The juice is loose.
So hey, where are you at when it comes to Beetlejuice? Like the first one, I mean.
You know, I've been sort of all over the place with it, to be honest. I didn't really grow up with it necessarily. I think I maybe saw it once on TV, like really early, like when I was 9 or 10 or something. And it just wasn't the Tim Burton movie that I kept going back to. You know, for me, that was like Edward Scissorhands, Batman, you know, all those things. And so in my head, it was like, oh yeah, I like the aesthetic of that movie. I like the score a lot, but I don't have a lot of feelings about it. And then actually just within the last year or two, I decided to pop it in because I felt like, you know, it's a movie that I don't feel like I actually really know super, super well. And maybe it'll feel fresh to watch it again. And I have to say it did. And it could be, I mean, I think it's good. Obviously it's been popular ever since it came out, but I just love how there's nothing like it. You know, I mean, it really probably is style over substance, but I think the characters are unique and fun. I think the visuals are unique and fun. The score, it's just truly one of a kind. And I think something like that sticks with you. So I had a great time rewatching it recently. I don't know.
So do you think it can be two of a kind?
I mean, that's the hope, right? Because I think I've said this on the show for years. I want to see Tim Burton make a Tim Burton movie again. And he's been working for Disney. So let's make Alice in Wonderland, but like Tim Burton. Let's, do this, but like Tim Burton. Dumbo. And no. I want a Tim Burton movie. Like what's rattling around in your head? I like what you do. I want to see a Tim Burton movie. And that's what I think we can hope from this movie. Like, these are his characters. This is his universe. He doesn't have to be beholden to anyone else. He gets to do what he wants to do. And I hope it's a return to fun, creepy weirdness and tactile, right? Like puppetry and sets and Danny Elfman's bonkers score and no studio being like, it'd be just like 10% less Elfman, please. Like, no, man, dude, go 11 Elfman. And if it's that, I think this movie could be a blast.
Okay. Well,
what about you?
Yeah, I'm, so you know, what's funny is I backed into Beetlejuice because I watched the cartoon show first.
Oh, okay.
And I always enjoyed the cartoon show. I actually have the complete series on DVD, and I recently used to watch it with my daughter when she was a little bit younger, and so I watched that first. And that in that show, Beetlejuice and what's her name, Winona Ryder, they're like buddies, right?
And they are very much not in the movie.
You watch the movie, you're like, oh my god, yeah. But it obviously is very unique. And so, they've been talking about a sequel since the 90s, right? Like,
yeah, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian.
Right. That was the thing that like Kevin Smith was I was going to say Kevin Spacey. That's right. Kevin Smith was asked to write.
Yeah.
And he was like, no.
Right. I think his quote was like, must we go tropical?
I think if you've got Tim Burton back, it's not like he needs to make this movie. And if you got Michael Keaton back, he certainly doesn't need to make this movie. And so that's what has me interested.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they've come up with a story that they deemed worth coming back for.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to wonder too, is there an audience for this? Like, what is the age range? Can this be for everybody? And I have a feeling, I think this is going to play really well. That's my hunch. And
Okay.
at the Godzilla Kong showing I was at, this trailer got applause. So,
Wow.
I mean,
okay.
I can't
that
think of
says
the last
something.
trailer that got the theater applauding.
Yeah, I know. The Nicole Kidman promo gets more applause than the actual.
Yes.
And this one comes out in the fall, so I suspect you and I will be back to do a little commentary track action for that one.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fun.
One presumes.
Yeah, this is September 6th.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Oh, and Jenna Ortega, they're to bring in the youngsters.
Mm-hmm.
What with all that dancing that she does, the Wednesday dance
That's right.
that the kids love.
I mean, you have to admit, I mean, I actually didn't watch Wednesday, and maybe I should, because I keep talking about how much I like Tim Burton. But yeah, she feels just, I mean, designed to be a character in these films, right? I mean, she looks like Lydia's daughter, right?
She does.
So
It's kind of remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, hey, let's take another short break and talk through some headlines. And we are back, and a little bit of sad news, Brian. Louis Gossett Jr. has passed away.
right, yes.
Louis Gossett Jr. is, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like he's just like, he is always there.
Yeah, I mean, immediately I think Iron Eagle.
Iron Eagle. I was going to say Officer and a Gentleman, but let's be honest, it's Iron Eagle.
Yeah, for us.
for us, for our generation. But quite an impressive legacy. He was the first black actor to win Best Supporting Actor.
Oh, wow.
Right, and that's like, oh, and once the barrier's down, it's down. But he was the first one to do it, and that was for Officer and a Gentleman.
I have to admit, I've never seen that.
I have seen the Simpsons parody of it.
Yes, I'm familiar with the ending because I know it gets riffed on a lot.
I've seen the clip
Yes.
of Richard Gere being like, don't you do that?
Yep.
I got nowhere else to go.
That's right. That's what that's from. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen the whole movie. I've just seen that clip.
Sorry, just total tangent, but I watched Raging Bull for the first time recently, and there's a part where Jake LaMotta, the boxer, there's a boxer he has to fight who's handsome, and he hates that. And so then he just beats the crap out of him, destroys his face. And I said out loud, he ain't pretty no more. And then in the movie, a character goes, he ain't pretty no more. And I was like,
you'd been quoting this thing without realizing.
I was like, that's where that's from. Oh, wait. Okay. So I know that. I didn't know it was from this, and I used it at the right moment.
At that point, like the sky opened up on above your head, and you just disappeared into. You were pulled up, and
yeah, I turned into stardust.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Louis Gossett, he had been in I think the first time I like connected name and face was this TV show that was part of like the NBC Mystery Wheel. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? They would do like, it was like Columbo one week, and it would be, a BL Striker, which is a Burt Reynolds thing. So it was called Gideon Oliver.
Wow. Okay.
And as is so often the case, I first became aware of Gideon Oliver because of a Mad magazine called Giddy Up Oliver.
Okay.
And then they showed it on TV in Saudi Arabia. I was like, oh, okay. And I made that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this show must be huge. It must be famous. And it lasted like 6 episodes.
Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me, the things that are alive inside your mind. Like I've never heard of this. Yeah.
However, he was in a movie in 1985, which I would recommend if you haven't seen it or anybody else. It's really good. It's a sci-fi movie called Enemy Mine.
Man, I remember the VHS cover from the video store.
This is, who directed it? Wolfgang Peterson.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah, it's Dennis Quaid as a human and Louis Gossett as this alien who are they're enemies with each other, and they're trapped on this planet and they have to rely on each other to survive.
You know what? I'm writing it down. That just sounds like something I'll love.
It's a good movie.
Okay, great.
Yeah. It's short. It's like 110 minutes.
Chef's kiss.
You know, it's like a rock solid. It's kind of like No Escape, which I don't know if you ever got around to watching that.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, that's another one I've been recommending. Right?
Yeah.
Where it's like it's not shooting for the moon. It's just doing like a grounded, small scale sci-fi story, and it works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually had no idea that Wolfgang Petersen had directed it, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's a good one. So obviously, in addition to that, he had been in Roots, and he had really just a consistent presence for a very long time.
Yeah.
So a remarkable legacy left behind by Louis Gossett Jr., who is gone at age 87. Moving on, another bit of news that literally just dropped in the last day. There's another Matrix movie that's potentially on the way.
I know, it's a little surprising, right? Because it feels like the last one was made, if I had this correctly, because the Wachowskis, Warner Brothers was basically like, look, we're gonna make a Matrix sequel.
Yes.
So I think it was Lana Wachowski was like, well, if it's gonna happen, then I might as well try to say something I want to say and make it myself.
Right.
So It felt like that would be then a conclusion, right?
Right.
I guess at least with the original authors, but of course, I mean, the name's too big. It can't end there. So
in Hollywood, nothing stays dead.
No.
The dead refuse to die.
No. So Drew Goddard, the guy who made Cabin in the Woods, which I think is a great little horror movie.
And certainly has a Matrix-esque sensibility in terms of being a bit meta.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Drew Goddard goes to Warner Brothers with a pitch for a fifth Matrix movie. Warner Brothers says, sure, sounds good. And Lana Wachowski is on board as an executive producer, which, if you read between the lines, certainly signals to me that she will have no real involvement, but she will get a paycheck.
Yeah, as she should.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We don't know if Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss are going to be back.
Yeah. Interesting.
We don't know if this is a reboot. We don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, worth mentioning that Matrix Resurrections, a movie I adored, you liked it a little bit less, came out at the tail end of 2021 and tanked.
Yeah. Weird time.
I mean, yes and no, right? Yeah, I agree, because it was part of that Project Popcorn thing where Warner Brothers movies were all released day and date on streaming and in theaters.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I guess I had been to a theater by then, because there was a minute where movies were coming out in theaters, but I mean, they were in the box office top 10. They were side by side with like Raiders of the Lost Ark, just because it was such a free for all at theaters, just to get people to show up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but by late 21, Spider-Man No Way Home made $1 billion plus, right?
That's true, but I do actually remember that being many people saying that was the first movie that got them back.
Okay.
To be, you're right. You're right. I mean, people were back by that point. I have it's a little fuzzy.
Ghostbusters had come, Afterlife had come out right around then. I mean, okay. So I have no doubt that Project Popcorn played a role.
Yeah.
But I mean, it cost $190 million and it made $160 million. So there's no good face that you can put on that,
No, and I got to say, to my memory, it did not look like $190 million movie.
That's true. And I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, now I said it at the time, I say it still. I liked it a lot. I think it serves as a perfectly good epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you think about it now, it's like, well, I guess it's an epilogue to the Wachowskis' version of the Matrix.
Sure.
And now this is going to become, it's going to become Disney's Star Wars.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, but I mean, it does make me happy. Drew Goddard, I think he is a mind that I tend to like. Like I said, Cabin in the Woods, Bad Times at the El Royale, which I think is half a good movie.
Okay.
I was very invested the first half of that movie, so I'll give it that. But and he's written, The Martian, the Matt Damon Stuck on Mars movie, World War Z.
Mhm.
Like even if I don't love all of those movies, every single one of those films has something that made me perk up and go, oh, well, that's interesting.
Right.
So him having a take on The Matrix, I go, oh, okay, I'm curious.
So the quote here, this is from Jesse Ehrman at Warner Brothers. It says, Drew came to Warner's with a new idea that we all believe would be an incredible way to continue the Matrix world by both honoring what Lana and Lily began over 25 years ago and offering a unique perspective based on his own love of the series and characters. The entire team at Warner Brothers Discovery is thrilled for Drew to be making this new Matrix film, adding his vision to the cinematic canon the Wachowskis spent a quarter of a century building here at the studio. Which all just sounds like a whole bunch of hugger-mugger. Right? That's a lot of words saying nothing.
Yeah.
Right? So definitely it's one of those things where I'm like, well, on the one hand, you say, well, do we need a fifth one, especially when being generous, Zaki Hassan notwithstanding, the only one that's really well regarded is the first one.
Sure. Even though you and I like the trilogy.
I think so, but I think it's fair to say we're in the minority on that.
No, you're right.
Right?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what they have in mind, but I would say, don't make a $200 million movie. I mean, it doesn't have to. The action is the spectacle. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go crazy with all the other stuff. Just come up with some creative, inventive action that doesn't have to cost $200 million.
See, here's my thought. I have two thoughts that are sort of at competing ends with each other. Because on the one hand, I'm like, it's been 25 years. And what's wrong with letting the generation that grew up with those films now take a swing at it, right?
I agree with that, actually. I think it's kind of neat to bring someone else to mine a story in that fertile universe.
Absolutely. So there's that. On the other hand, my worry is that, it's just like it's Star Wars post George Lucas, right? And you can like or dislike each in the individual films or whatever, but it went from being something that was the singular result of a person or person's creative muse into a product, right?
Yeah, and it runs the risk of becoming repetitive because
we gotta have bullet time. It's gonna be like the scene in Resurrections. Remember when the corporate people are like, "Oh, we gotta have this and we gotta have this,"
Exactly.
Right?
I think that was. No. I know where I'm saying
that movie was Lana Wachowski being like, "Here's what I think of what Warner Brothers is trying to do." Right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's my thought.
No, and I've mostly enjoyed the Star Wars output post Lucas, but I think when it dips a little bit is when it just feels like it is repeating itself too much out of obligation. And so that's what I just hope with this. I hope that they don't feel the need. Yeah, like a checklist. It's got to be this. There's got to be the one. There's got to be it's like, I don't know. Like, if you have a unique and cool and interesting idea that illuminates something new on that universe, that sounds exciting. But if it's just a retread and there's another one.
See, I don't want a Force Awakens.
Exactly.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Exactly. Even though I kind of like the Force Awakens, but like,
sure. I like Force Awakens, but Brian, being honest, right? When you watch that movie, it feels like J.J. Abrams walking us through a Star Wars theme park that he created. Like,
yeah, well, he sets up a bunch of interesting new things, but then feels almost obligated to have the third act be A New Hope out of some sort of obligation or feeling like the poetry it rhymes kind of.
Yes, and
that's why the movie to me dips a little bit.
It dips, and above and beyond that, it's so strenuously beholden to the iconography of the original trilogy that It doesn't feel like a progression. And what I personally liked about Resurrections is that because it was Lana Wachowski and it was the world that she created, she felt comfortable moving the ball forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I don't want to see, I don't want to reboot, number one.
Yeah.
Nor do I want something that is like, oh, we're going to ignore, everything after the first one, which we see a lot of.
Oh, yeah, definitely no.
That'll piss me off like nothing else. So I'm kind of like, take us back into the Matrix as it exists now has been established via the fourth movie. Now do something with it. I don't need to see Neo and Trinity again.
Mm-hmm.
If you find a way to incorporate them that works, that's fine. But play the ball where it is, move it forward, and I'll be interested.
I agree. Like I was saying, I mean, if good action and a great idea, that's all you need. And it just not repeating any ideas, but finding a new idea that is intriguing inside that existing universe. I mean, I don't know. Sounds good to me.
I agree with that. Any other headlines, Brian?
Yes. Well, it was recently announced that Julia Garner is going to be playing an iteration of the Silver Surfer in the upcoming Marvel movie Fantastic Four. So I wanted to acknowledge that news because I think we're both looking forward to that movie. But I also wanted to take the opportunity to ask you about the character of the Silver Surfer because I don't really know a lot about Silver Surfer. And oftentimes on this show, when I have a question about comic books, I like going to you because you are a rich resource who can explain all this to me and to any of the listeners who, may not know the character as well as others. So I was hoping that you could, tell me a little bit about Silver Surfer, this iteration of Silver Surfer, and let me know what we can possibly expect from the upcoming movie.
Okay, so the Silver Surfer is the herald of Galactus. So Galactus is an omnipotent being who travels the galaxy, searching for planets to essentially suck the energy out of. So the planets die so that he can live, right? Mm-hmm. And so the Silver Surfer is essentially the person who goes and seeks out planets that can serve as sustenance for him. And then in the context of the comic books, what happened is the Silver Surfer came to Earth and he came to admire and appreciate the humans on Earth. And he realized that even as he has signaled to Galactus to come devour this planet, he can't let Galactus do that. So he turns against Galactus, and Galactus punishes him by saying, fine, you are trapped here on Earth. I'll spare this planet, but you're trapped here. And so, from the 60s until the 80s, he was trying to leave Earth. And then he had a comic book series in the late 80s where he was finally able to leave Earth, and that became his whole deal. So his origin, he's Norin Rad, who is he's from a planet called Zenla, and essentially Galactus came to his planet and he said, let me be your herald. I'll find planets that are uninhabited. And I'll give up my humanity to save my planet. That's his origin. So, and he had a love interest named Shalabal, who said, you can't leave because we're in love. And he says, no, I'm the Silver Surfer now. I don't think he actually said that, but now during the course of the comic books, at some point there's another version, like an alternate universe, where Shalabal herself became a Silver Surfer. And so the casting that they announced of Julia Garner, she of like Ozark, I think that's what I know her from. Yeah. So she's going to play the Shalabal version of the Silver Surfer.
Okay. And this is supposedly taking place in an alternate universe, right?
I don't know anything about the movie, to be honest. So I'm not. I don't know if it's like a period picture. Seems like it might be because of that painting or that image that they released, right?
Yeah, sort of a 60s retro aesthetic.
Yeah. So I don't know all the details, but I have not bothered looking online to see the reactions, but I'm sure that they're all perfectly normal and rational because a woman is playing the Silver Surfer.
I don't know what sort of circles my algorithm is keeping for me, but it actually seemed fairly good.
Sure. Hey, that's something.
Rational. I think I think she has a lot of goodwill from Ozark. It seems
Okay.
like I've not seen Ozark, but it seems like she is a character that a lot of people enjoy. So they're happy to see her again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like, in the absence of any further information, I can't really make a judgment. I like the Silver Surfer. I like the character a lot. I have a whole run of his comics.
Mhm.
You know, I don't I don't think there's anything that says that version of the character can't show up at some point.
Mm-hmm. So wait, what does Silver Surfer do on Earth?
So
Fight crime?
basically, so you know, the Silver Surfer was like Stan Lee's favorite character.
Really?
However, it's kind of interesting. He was also like he was the source of probably the final breakdown between Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Because essentially, the way it would work when they were creating comic books, they would use what was called the Marvel method, which really is just a way for Stan Lee. I mean, just being candid, it was a way for him to get away with doing less work.
Okay.
And he would do this by, like, let's say I'm Stan Lee and I'm talking to you, you're Jack Kirby. I'd be like, so Jack, in this issue, where there's this big guy named Galactus who's going to show up and he's trying to eat the planet and the Fantastic Four have to stop him. Like, I would just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, as Jack Kirby, would go off and draw the pages.
Mm-hmm.
Well, given that, I mean, who's doing the lion's share of the work there?
Sure.
Right? So in essence, the story would be plotted by Jack Kirby.
Mm.
So by virtue of that, he was like, hey, you know, somebody who's as enormous and amazing and, and dangerous as Galactus should have a herald. And so he came up with this idea of the Silver Surfer. And so Stan Lee was like, oh, I love this character. And then he would get the pages and he would dialogue them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he really loved the character. And so he said, oh, we should give the Silver Surfer his own comic book. But he didn't have Stan Lee do it. He had another artist do it named John Buscema who did an amazing job. But essentially, Stan Lee came up with an origin for the character that was not what Jack Kirby had. And Jack Kirby was like, dude, I created that character. It's like 100% mine.
Mm-hmm.
But Stan Lee gets co-creator credit on it because he wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him, it was like, again, it's just they had completely different intentions. But what Stan Lee liked about him was that he was kind of this tragic character because he can soar through the cosmos, but he's trapped on Earth and he's observing and seeing, you know, all the great and amazing things we human beings have, but we're so miserable and awful to each other. And so he would be, it'd be a lot of like philosophizing, you know?
Okay.
And so Stan Lee was really on board with that. The book ended up not selling, right? So it got canceled after like 18 issues. And Stan Lee was so heartbroken by that he said no one else is allowed to write a Silver Surfer book other than me.
Huh. Okay.
And that remained the case up until like the late 80s.
Wow.
You know, but then he got an ongoing book in, I want to say like 87, and it lasted until like the late 90s. So, you know, the character is popular.
Mm-hmm.
But he's virtually a blank slate. I mean, the way he was portrayed in the previous film, Rise of the Silver Surfer, the Fantastic Four sequel, it's pretty much on point, you know?
You know, I never watched that one.
I actually prefer that one to the first one.
Maybe I should check it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, it's not the Magnificent Ambersons.
Sure. But just there's like a primer, I suppose. You know, just
I think so. I mean, I think, you know, what's funny is I remember I watched that movie with Amina, and she was like, "What's the deal with the Silver Surfer?" Mm-hmm. And so I was like, you know, watch this. And I put on, there was a Silver Surfer cartoon show in the late 90s. And so I played the first episode for her, which has his origin. And it gives like his kind of, he's like a tragic figure, right? Because he sacrifices his humanity to save his planet. Mm-hmm. And they did it very well, you know, where it's like essentially, you know, he's like a blank slate, you know, so he's like, Galactus, spare my planet and I'll serve you. And then he's transformed into the Silver Surfer and he has no memory of who he is. And he after he's transformed, he tells Galactus, Master, how about this planet? Meaning his own planet.
Right.
He doesn't remember. And Galactus is like, no, I made a vow to a good man that I would spare this planet.
Ah,
You know?
I like that.
And I remember Amina being like, man, it's like so sad, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's good.
So it's a great character. So, I trust the Marvel people to know what they're doing, you know?
I'm excited. I mean, that's the thing too. The movies were starting to feel a little repetitive for me, and it could be because it's a lot of sequels, right? And so I'm excited to see, Marvel obviously a little bit of a lull or a rut or whatever you want to call it these days, but they're still the best at what they do.
That's right.
Let's face it. So with new characters, new universe, possibly back in time, different era, I'm excited. I'm excited for something fresh from them.
And I think, I would hope that Marvel would look at the success of things like Dune, for example, which is so it's not your traditional blockbuster, and yet people have shown up again and again for it.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, when I think of Marvel lately, I think of like Ant-Man, Quantumania,
same, yeah,
right?
Sure.
And a bunch of CGI nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Muddy blue screen nonsense.
Right.
And I'm like, it's a shame because like just recently over the last couple of weeks, I was channel surfing and they had the first Iron Man on and I was just watching some of it. I'm like, this movie is so good.
Yeah.
Yep. And I want to get back to something that makes me think of that again,
100%. Yep. I want story to be king. Story and characters to be king.
Exactly.
Yep.
By the way, the Legendary has officially confirmed that they are working on Dune 3.
Oh, great!
With Denis Villeneuve involved, so that's happening.
Yeah, and for people who are interested, I listened to the DGA podcast, and it was Steven Spielberg interviewing Denis Villeneuve about Dune 2, and it's only 30 minutes, and it's very interesting. So I think people might enjoy that.
I'm excited for. I'm curious actually because this is in Variety. When are they looking at for? Well,
because he has another movie coming up potentially first, right? I think it was just announced today.
Nuclear War, a scenario.
Yeah, sort of. What would happen if a nuclear scenario played out? A
feel-good movie.
Yeah, I was gonna. Well, it reminded me of in the 80s there was a bunch of movies like this. Yes. Yeah.
On the waterfront, is that what it's called? No, was it on the beach?
I just remember The Day After, and then there's
The Day
that
After was a big one.
Oh shoot, was it with Anthony Edwards?
I was going to say that Anthony Edwards movie.
Yeah, it's great, and I was like talking that one up a couple years ago. Can't think of the name.
That was almost a Twilight Zone movie.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there was like this big sort of like nuclear panic, and so sort of these what if stories were compelling and interesting, and it makes me wonder if,
by the way,
Miracle Mile, yes, which I really enjoyed, by the way.
I watched it because of you.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, I wonder because of his age if he sort of grew up with those and thought I could play in that.
Yeah,
I could play in that scenario. So
that means that at the earliest we'd be looking at 4 or 5 years for Dune Part 3.
Call me old school, but I'm into it.
Well, no, I agree, especially because there's a gap of about 10 to 15 years between the first and second books. So I don't mind, Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya getting some lines on their face before we move on to the next one,
Totally. Give a little breathing room and then can get excited about it again.
Well, and with that in mind, I mean, while we're talking about Marvel, I think it's sort of the best thing possible. This year is only Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it seems like people are excited for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have a feeling it's going to perform. I can't imagine it won't.
Oh,
and then you let people wait a little bit, for whatever the next thing is.
Yeah. How do you feel though, just out of curiosity, the only Marvel movie coming out this year is rated R? Like something that your youngest can't go see.
You're acting like Madam Web didn't happen.
Well, that's in association with Marvel. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I was talking about this with Dominic. She's like, "Oh well, the kids can't go to see Deadpool," you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "I think my older two have already seen Deadpool,"
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, and she's like, "You're okay with that?" I'm like, "I'm not saying I watched it with them. I'm saying they've watched it, and
Mhm.
like I watched R-rated movies when I was that age."
Mm-hmm.
So I have this dilemma, right? Because I remember being, 13 or 14 and watching all the Lethal Weapons that were out up to that time.
Sure.
And that's probably about on par for what you'd get in a Deadpool movie.
Yeah, I mean, not even necessarily the content, but I just mean, like when you think of Ant-Man or something, it's you can take your 8-year-old and you can be 38,
Sure.
right? But just literally speaking, that 9-year-old or whoever can't buy a ticket for themselves to go see a Marvel movie this year.
Well, I personally feel that Marvel should get out of the box of everything being PG-13.
Yeah,
Right. And
I kind of agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So like, for example, recently they've decided by fiat that actually all the Netflix Marvel shows are going to be considered canon now to the MCU.
Right.
That was not the case 2 months ago, but as of 1 month ago, it's the case. And those shows are clearly rated R.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I think that's good. I think that it's good for the universe to have room for that,
Mm-hmm.
like this Blade movie that's been kicking around for God knows how long, right?
Yeah.
With Mahershala Ali, that's going to be rated R. They said,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, well, good. Spend $60 million on it, and make, you know what I mean? Make something R rated that you don't need to have to sell lunchboxes and stuff.
I kind of agree with that. I mean, they may as well be a true studio that's making PG movies, PG-13 movies, R-rated movies, television, like, yeah, cover it all.
Yeah,
right?
and so when it comes to something like Deadpool 3, it's like, well, it'll be there waiting for you when you're ready.
Right.
It's tricky though. I mean, I get it because it's like, I mean, my 10-year-old wants to go see it, and I'm like, well, you're not going, so enjoy that. And then I like laughed and pointed, which probably
Yeah, I'm going. Let's be clear. I'm going. You will not be going.
I'd love to say I'll be thinking of how how bad I feel about you not being there, but I won't.
Do you remember when they experimented with the PG-13 Deadpool?
Oh, I think yeah, that's right.
Deadpool Part 2, and
it was like Once Upon a Deadpool.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. Did you watch it?
I did. Yeah, and it has a framing device that's basically the Princess Bride.
Okay.
So Fred Savage, as a grown man, is dressed in the Chicago Bears jersey in a bed, and Deadpool is like Peter Falk reading him the story of Deadpool.
That's hilarious.
And it was one of those things where I watched it because my friend worked at Fox, and we just got it for free. And I didn't even notice what it had or didn't have.
It's so arbitrary, right?
It's surprisingly arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot what it was or what it was rated by the time all was said and done because it felt the same.
Right.
But, yeah.
So that's the other thing. I mean, I took all of my, well, not my daughter, my youngest, but I took all my boys to The Dark Knight earlier this year. And that's like one step removed from R, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, Brian. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
Nothing makes sense. I saw this total tangent. I saw this thing, this TikTok post is going viral where this person, she's holding court at great length about how SNL does not hire any attractive women.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
And specifically, she's like, I came to this realization when I saw a sketch about this person, and it shows a picture of Heidi Gardner, and how she's supposed to be so hot, and she's just not. And I'm like, I have a huge crush on Heidi Gardner.
I know.
So I'm like, what the hell's going on? Nothing makes sense.
We should make a Kickstarter for her to take a visit to the optometrist because.
Right. I mean, so leaving aside just Heidi Gardner because she was the specific focus, and I'm like, well, I think objectively she's beautiful. It's like, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Kristen Wiig and Tina Fey. I mean, it's a long list.
It's a long. I've had a long-standing Kristen Wiig crush, so yeah, it's ridiculous.
And I was just like, man, people just say anything, don't they? Like,
I know, but it's amazing because I think even she was caught off guard with. She has this small little audience, and by the way, this is not a defense, but it was funny where her response was, "Whoa, I was not prepared for this." Like this caught attention, and now people from SNL, Sarah Sherman, I think,
yes, that's right.
to it. And she was like, "I did not think this was going to go as big as it did," but she was unrepentant. By the way, she like. Basically, doubled down, and it was. I don't know, man. Some people.
I'm just like that. If I'm Heidi Gardner and I see that, I would feel really bad.
I know. Even when people are coming to your defense, it's gonna get in your mind,
right?
And
I'm like, why put that out? Why put that negative energy out there?
No, it's just a petty, shitty little thing to do.
Yeah.
On
that note, let's take a short break. We'll talk about this week's new release. And we are back, and you know who else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zach?
Why, it's Godzilla and Kong, a.k.a. Gojira, and Kingston Kongstein. I don't know. That's... I'm going to say he's Jewish. I don't know.
I was really curious. I was like, oh, do you know the Japanese name for King Kong?
So Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, a.k.a. Godzilla times Kong, the New Empire, or as the filmmakers call it, perplexingly, Godzilla Kong, the New Empire.
I saw that. Yeah, it's like, you don't say the X. I'm like, well, then why'd you put it there?
Yeah, I don't think they know what purpose letters serve in this world.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is in theaters now. Massive opening. I believe it's the biggest opening weekend of the year.
Yeah. It was like 80 million or somewhere around there. Big.
Very big. So as before, now again, Godzilla and Kong have saved theaters because if you remember, in the midst of the pandemic, Godzilla vs. Kong was released and it breathed life into theatrical.
I remember that, yeah.
And so Adam Wingard, the director, is back for another go round of hot monkey on lizard action.
Yep.
Or monkey on monkey action, I guess, in this one.
A little bit.
So there is one scene in this movie where there's like a little mini Kong. Who our friend, your friend and mine, King Kong, he encounters him in the Hollow Earth, and he's essentially Kong is lulled into thinking that he's a friend, but in fact he's against him, and a whole bunch of other people attack Kong. And so Kong grabs this little mini Kong by the legs and starts smacking the other monkeys with this little mini Kong.
Yeah, he treats him like nunchucks, basically. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite part of this movie. I laughed uproariously at that. A lot of people have really enjoyed this one, Brian. I am not among them.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
I was dulled into just an absolute stupor by the end of it. I was like, God, this movie is it's just too much of this. It's just too much. I can't stand watching another monument getting, destroyed.
Don't mess with me, man. Don't mess with me. Are you trolling me right now?
I'm not trolling you. I was
prepared to be the one person who didn't like this movie.
I was exhausted by the end of it. I was like, I
I don't know why. I feel like I'm on a hidden camera show right now.
I'm not.
I was like, how do I say this respectfully that I didn't really like this?
It didn't do much of anything for me. And but let me say this. I would say this irrespective of whether I had seen Godzilla -1 just a few months ago.
Totally.
Because I want to be very clear about that, because I have room in my heart for many flavors of Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
However, to me, it's because what I've seen people say is like, look, you can have a filet mignon and you can have a hamburger. Godzilla -1 is the filet mignon, and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, that's the hamburger. I'm like, no. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is like 50 hamburgers that you're forced to eat.
Yes.
That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, but it's all patty. There's no bun, and you're like, yeah, but I kind of like. I don't want to just eat cooked beef. I mean, can I have some pickles also? Character development. Can I have some lettuce, tomato? Story. Can I have? Can I have like a bun? Like logic holding it all together. No. You just get a big fat freaking beef patty. Enjoy. You know what, though? To be fair, this is funny. I was sort of prepared, I'm going to be honest, for you to like it more than me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to find like a diplomatic way to talk about it. And it's funny you talk about flavors, because I started writing things down, like trying to articulate this. And I basically came up with, there are those who like black licorice and there are those who don't. Right? It's candy. And some people like the flavor of black licorice as a treat. I just don't. And so this movie made $80 million in its opening weekend. The cinema score was an A.
A-, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, look, I am really, there's a lot of people that like black licorice. And like, I think that's really great. We don't have to all love the same stuff. Right. But so I didn't want to just come out and say that I think it's a bad movie necessarily, because obviously there's something people are latching onto for this. But why I want to explain that I didn't like it, the two biggest problems for me was there weren't any characters that I cared about enough to ground this story.
Mm-hmm. And that's always been a problem with the MonsterVerse films.
It's tricky.
But it's most egregious in this one, I would say.
Yeah, and I also have to admit that I'm not really endeared to these creatures, and I know many people are from growing up with them. But I don't have that helping me out with this. So like at the end of the day, I just felt like I was watching someone else play a video game. And the whole time I was kind of wishing I could be in another room watching something else. But again, I mean, saying that I'm not endeared to the creatures, I back to what you said, I have to say that I loved Godzilla -1. That was one of my favorite movies of last year. But I think the reason for that was, for me, it had characters that were more rounded and interesting, who I cared about. The destruction had emotional impact. And all of the action to combat Godzilla was inventive and thrilling, and at the end of the day, emotionally satisfying. And I just didn't feel any of those things for this. Like for me, this kind of felt like a 2-hour VFX resume.
Yeah, and I think that was my issue. And go back and listen. I liked the first Godzilla versus Kong movie.
See, I kind of remember being a little surprised that I was like, look, it's not necessarily my bag, but I didn't have a bad time.
Yeah, I think for me, because I was trying to reconcile, well, how come this with this one and this with this one, right? How come I had these? And I was like, I feel like I sort of hit my limit for how much I'm on board with just CGI smashy.
Mm-hmm. When there's no palpable stakes.
Yes.
I could even get on board with that if I was invested in the outcome. And this movie didn't give that to me.
Yeah. And I think the problem for me is I was thinking about this actually, because I just watched the Monarch television show.
Right.
Which I really liked.
Yeah.
And what I realized is the monsters exist in that world, but it's a show really about those characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a show about, Kurt Russell in the present, and Wyatt Russell as the younger Kurt Russell in the past, and these intertwining storylines. That's what was interesting to me. And oh, by the way, there's these kaiju. But when we're like, hey, Godzilla and Kong together, and I'm like, yeah, but I care about them as avatars for whatever our human characters are experiencing. Right? To me, like I loved Kong Skull Island. That was actually one of my favorite movies of that year.
Yeah, I remember that was pretty good.
And I thought the characters were interesting in that one. You know, the
Yeah,
Tom
yeah.
Tom Hiddleston and John Goodman. You know, I mean, and there was a whole bunch of interesting, and it was like a Vietnam commentary. There's some interesting stuff happening. You know, even the 24 to the Gareth Edwards Godzilla. You know, Bryan Cranston really anchors the first third of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
The second Godzilla, which I liked more than you, but for me, a big part of why I liked it is because Ken Watanabe's character is like the moral center of that movie. With this, it's like we got, you know, Rebecca Hall, like she didn't, you know, her character didn't really stick with me from the last one. And then Dan Stevens is like, hey, he's the gonzo monster dentist or whatever. I'm like, bring back Tarzan from the last one, what's his name? Skarsgård. That's my biggest thing. It's like you got to give us human characters that are interesting. And actually, with Godzilla, the Godzilla King of the Monsters, you know why I like that one? Because I liked Kyle Chandler in it, and I liked the relationship with the daughter, you know, with Millie Bobby Brown. Vera Farmiga was, you know, there was some interesting character dynamics at play. With this, it's like again, I can't watch just CGI monsters destroying the pyramids and then this happens. I'm like, it's just too much, man. I don't know.
I will say, you were talking about him using, I'm just going to call him Diddy Kong. Diddy Kong is like nunchucks. I will admit that probably my favorite scene was the pyramids. And I think the reason for that was I understand the scale of that. And I think, I mean, I say this all the time. I love fantasy in your backyard.
Sure.
And so I understand the pyramids. I understand, you know, and seeing these two oversized creatures fighting and bumping into those things made me realize like, whoa, that's really epic. And it's crazy to see those things affected by these two monsters. But then at the end, when you have all the monsters fighting and there's no gravity and everyone's just floating this way and that, I was like, I don't even know what's going on here. Like, you know, I'm not feeling any tension. I'm not feeling any scale or any stakes. It's just kind of, you know.
Yeah, well, and the fact that you've got entire scenes where you've got like apes like talking to each other, but this is not like Planet of the Apes. They're just apes. I mean, they're like big monster apes. But they're like grunting at each other, and we're supposed to be like, oh, okay, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
It was and so it's like I get it. Okay, so these apes are like being, you know, put upon, and then in comes King Kong, and he's gonna you know, straighten them all out. And I don't know. It felt. I felt very disconnected because it was like watching the CGI Lion King movie for most of this stuff. I didn't feel any sense of stakes. I didn't feel any sense of scale because, like, you know, inside the Hollow Earth, we don't have a concept of how big these monsters are. That was the other thing. Right? So,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's a moment. Yeah.
No, that's it.
Well, there's a moment where it's okay. So you have, who is it? Brian Tyree Henry is very excited to see Hollow Earth. And he goes down there and he's like, whoa, which kind of makes sense, right? It looks like Earth, but there's another Earth kind of upside down above it. And then there was a moment where they enter a new area and everyone goes, whoa. And I thought, it looks just like the other area. Like, you know what I mean? It's like they were trying to tell me that this was epic and amazing, but it all looks the same. And I just wasn't feeling any of that awe, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny, you're speaking of the characters and related to the fact that our real true main characters can't talk. Exactly. I thought the only function the humans had was to basically explain to us either what was happening, how things worked, or what the characters who can't speak are thinking. You know, and so they really had nothing going on for themselves, aside from Rebecca Hall's character and the adopted daughter. But, you know, so it's, I saw it with Chad, and Rebecca Hall would be like, oh, the reason he's thinking this is because that thing will affect this, which means this, which will unleash that. And we would like silently turn to each other, just stare at each other for half a beat, and then like look back at the screen. And I was like, God bless her, because she's doing it. She's working for it. But that's, what am I invested in? It's like these characters have to basically read me the action lines from the screenplay because no one else can say anything.
Yeah, and that's the thing ultimately is I totally I get the appeal, which is, it evokes Godzilla movies like the the Showa era of Godzilla, which is like from the 50s through the 70s, where it's just Godzilla versus X monster,
Sure.
And there's fans of those. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even those films, they benefited from their limitations.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so that's where you see it's like when you throw an unlimited budget at a supersized monster smash fest. This is just me. I'm going to check out.
You're making me think of something also. I think a problem that the filmmakers might not even realize they're having when everything is created inside of a computer is if nothing looks hard, then it's not interesting.
That's a good point.
And basically these monsters can leap as far as they need to. They can swim as deep as they need to. They can summon enough energy as they need to. It's not like they have just not enough energy. So they have to get creative and come up with something clever that they learned from earlier to satisfy, to squash their enemy. They can always do what's required of them, and that's not interesting.
Well, in that vein, a big plot point, and this is in all the ads and stuff, is like Godzilla is like supercharged, and now he's got like pink energy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how it's different from before.
It looks exactly the same. Everything blows up the same way it did before. Agreed. I don't know what the difference is.
Right. So it's kind of like, DC has this problem with Green Lantern, right? Where you've got the Green Lantern core, and there you have their green rings that are willpower, and they can make all kinds of things. And then you've got other core. So you've got like the Sinestro core, and they have their yellow rings that are powered by fear, and they can make constructs and this and that. And I'm like, well, then it's all the same. Then it doesn't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You can be like, oh, it's powered by this or that, the other thing. It all looks the same. It's just different colors.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the problem here, where I'm like, other than it being another toy, I don't know what's different,
Yeah. And I mean, I just feel bad now piling on the movie, but I was also a little disappointed in the humor, with the humor that it attempted. It sort of felt like middle of the road 1990s must-see TV NBC jokes, whereas basically like, whatever you do, when they were about to ride to Hollow Earth and Brian Tyree Henry's character's a little nervous, someone's like, try not to swallow your tongue. And he's like, my tongue? What do you mean not swallow my tongue? Not swallow my tongue? Like, that's the level of jokes we're doing here. You know what I mean? Like, it's just this sort of really low-hanging fruit reactive kind of humor, and I was like, ugh, maybe just don't have it at all. But by the way, this is completely random, but I had to write this down. There's a moment too where Tyree Henry's character is using a camcorder, and he says, let me get that on footage. And that really stuck out to me, because I would say, let me get that on tape.
Yeah.
But he's not using tape. So I thought, let me get that on footage. Like, it rattled in my brain for like a good 2 minutes, thinking, does that even make sense? What would you say?
Is that a thing people say? Maybe we're just out of the loop. I
don't know. I just thought that was kind of fascinating. But I did think Godzilla sleeping in the Coliseum was funny.
I did. I found that, and I like that at the end he goes right back there.
Yes, he's made a little nest for himself.
He reminded me of my cat right there.
Totally.
It's weird. Let me say this. I genuinely, I want to emphasize, this is just like, I'm trying to say why it didn't work for me. I'm not saying it's a bad movie.
It's funny you say that. That's exactly what I wanted to come here with also, because I know this isn't for me. And seeing a lot of people loving it. So I love that they're getting served exactly what they were hoping for.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to do my best to explain why I didn't feel like I got a complete meal.
Well, gee whiz, I think we covered it.
Yeah, actually, I have just a couple things I wanted to ask you about. But I will say it's not very deep, but it is kind of sweet between the mom and the character Gia, I think her name is, the girl who comes from Hollow Earth, and I thought the young actress did a good job. She was very emotive. She never speaks. Wish they had done more with it, to be honest. I think it's kind of interesting that she has this relationship with Kong, and that could be kind of interesting. Anyway, what I wanted to ask you about, though, was what'd you think of the score? Every now and then it kind of kicked into this sort of 80s, upbeat 80s vibe I thought was interesting. And then there was these sort of random needle drops also. I don't know. I'm just curious your opinion.
Well,
like it was forcing a vibe, if I may.
So it's by Junkie XL.
Yeah.
And I like that he carried forward certain thematic material from the previous film.
Uh-huh.
So he's got like a Godzilla motif that I like, and he's got a Kong motif, and I liked that stuff. This is me. I tend to like seeing themes reoccur from movie to movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff I liked. The retro kind, it felt like synthwave kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of pulled me out a little bit.
I agree. I was at odds with it because I did find it perked me up, but I also felt like it was imposed on me a little bit, as if, it was like a friend trying to convince me I'm having a fun time kind of a thing. But I can't say I didn't like it either. It just didn't feel like that was the actual vibe of the movie, but it felt like it was trying to insist that was the vibe of the movie or something.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I did like the Junkie XL stuff, and I felt the needle drops were a little glaring. But again, it just felt like the movie was trying to convince me I was having a good time or something. And I was curious. Well, you said it, that they stood out to you a little bit.
I think fundamentally because I would say I like the MonsterVerse, and I like that it exists, and the success of this one means they're going to keep doing these movies, which I'm fine with. But I really, with this one, I'm like, well, what else can you do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of my concern, because it's just going to be more monsters fighting each other. And again, I'm not opposed to that, but I am like, if you don't give us a really compelling human aspect of the story, I just don't know how I'm going to feel interested.
Now, I agree. And so I guess my question is, and maybe this is illuminating that I don't know, but they were trying to prevent Scar, the bad Kong,
the Scar King, from getting to the surface. Yes.
Right. I mean, I know that because they told me that, but I don't know that I felt any fear or tension or, threat of that.
Yeah. I would say that's the mistake right there, right? It should have been that somehow the Scar King makes his way to the surface. That's Act 1.
Get him back down.
And or you're like, now Kong is at peace, but we need to get him to the surface to defeat the Scar King.
And like, why would he want to help us?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that I can wrap my head around, that I can understand needs to be resolved.
Because what they present is, if Godzilla and Kong are near each other, because they're both apex predators, they're going to attack each other.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as Godzilla's on the surface and Kong is down below, everything's fine. And that's why at the end when Kong comes to the surface and he's like trying to get Godzilla to come with him, and he's like, oh no. I wanted subtitles, or like I wanted something, because clearly they're trying to talk to each other. I just think it would have made it funnier.
Yeah. Like the dog Baxter in Anchorman, just sort of arcing.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, this is me, and maybe I'm thinking of the wrong part of my brain, but I'm like, if we're seeing these cities getting destroyed and things like that, like that's life is fundamentally different.
Mhm.
And the movie doesn't delve into that, right? If you're living in a constant state of potential kaiju attack,
Mhm.
civilization is nothing like it used to be.
I mean, easily hundreds of thousands of human lives are lost in this movie.
Exactly, right? And
Yeah.
again, like the Great Pyramids no longer exist by the end of this.
Yeah.
And so again, and this is this is the TV show set within this universe. It really delves into that.
No, that sounds
So it's
interesting
like
to me.
it's not even like an out of bounds comparison. It's literally it's set in the legendary MonsterVerse. So I'm not saying be like Godzilla -1. I'm saying be like the TV show.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, right. There was a moment where the Scar King used his like spine lasso
Mhm.
and cut a building in half and was wielding it around, and then Kong punches the top half of the building to stop it from hitting him. And I was like, well, there goes 400 people.
Yeah, right.
I mean, maybe it's best not to think about it. I don't know.
I mean, look, it's like it's the same issue I have with the third act of Man of Steel, right?
Which that movie has less than an excuse to not get into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just like I don't like Super Destructo and again, I really, even as I say this, I'm like, I'm talking about a Godzilla versus King Kong movie. What am I saying?
Yeah, no, I think you expect it, but I think I still want to have a handle on the scope of it and what's at stake and what we're losing. Because then when you just see them stomping all over the earth without addressing any of it, it stops feeling like anything at all. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I have a feeling people are going to be writing to us with their contrary opinions. So,
but can I bring up one more thing? I had
please,
to,
as many as you want.
So I had to laugh when the Scar King has all those apes working for him down there, and they're just kind of pushing rocks around. I was like, what are they doing?
That's a good point.
Like, what is he having them do?
Are they building something?
For him? Are they mining something? Like, it was so generic and just
so funny.
Like shorthand for like subjugation or something that I was like, wait, what are they doing?
The only thing missing was like the Temple of Doom music.
Yes, exactly. I even wondered what it said in the screenplay, if it was like, the apes are doing, labor stuff. It was just so non-specific, but like, you get it, kind of visual. It just made me laugh.
That's so funny.
Anyway, that's all I got.
That's all you got?
Yeah. You?
No, I'm good.
Well, we did it.
Yeah. Hey,
we saw it.
Well, we'll be back in our next regular show. We'll be talking about Civil War.
Yeah, I'm curious. I can't say that the trailers are doing a lot for me, but I like Alex Garland, so I'm really hoping to see something kind of meaty and interesting.
That's where I'm at too. So fingers crossed on that. But hey, if you have any differing viewpoints on Godzilla Kong, The New Empire, please let us know. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. As always, please go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, leave a star rating. Every little bit helps. Brian, do you have anything you want to hype up right now?
Yeah, as always, Young Jedi Adventures on Disney Plus and Disney Junior.
Awesome. And as for me, you can find my writing at the San Francisco Chronicle. I have my review of X-Men 97 up at the website right now, and I've got some other stuff in the pipeline, so look for that soon. With that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been Movie Film 288. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.